She told me I was too young, then kissed me like she'd been waiting her whole life. Let us uncover what really happened. The first time she told me I was too young, it wasn't a rejection, not exactly. It was a statement of fact, delivered with that infuriatingly calm, almost gentle amusement she reserved for moments when I was being particularly transparent in my adoration. We were in her office, the late afternoon sun slanting through the dusty blinds, illuminating the motes of dust dancing in the air, making the whole room feel like a forgotten sepia photograph. I'd been ostensibly asking about a project, a community arts initiative she was spearheading, but my questions had veered, as they often did, into more personal, more probing territory. I was hungry for details of her life, for any scrap of information that might illuminate the enigmatic creature she was. She was leaning back in her worn leather chair, a relic from some previous occupant, her long fingers steepled beneath her chin, those ridiculously intelligent, impossibly dark eyes fixed on me, with an intensity that always made my breath catch. I'd just said something earnest, and probably a little naive about changing the world, one brushstroke at a time, and she'd smiled, that slow, subtle curve of her lips that always made my stomach perform a series of complicated, unwelcome acrobatics. "You have so much fire, Alara," she'd said, her voice that low, melodic timbre that vibrated through me like the bass notes of a cello. "It's refreshing. And a little terrifying." I'd preened, of course, her words a balm to my perpetually insecure teenage soul. "But you're young," she'd added, the amusement a soft undercurrent in her tone. So wonderfully, terrifyingly young. And there it was. The unspoken chasm. The invisible, insurmountable barrier. I was 18, on the cusp of adulthood, feeling ancient and worldly in my own mind, yet in her eyes, I was clearly still a child, a creature of unformed potential and charming, if somewhat exhausting, idealism. She was, well, I didn't know exactly how old she was. 30-something? 40 even? It was impossible to tell. She had a timeless quality, as if she had existed for centuries, absorbing the wisdom and weariness of the ages. Her face, when you looked closely, was a roadmap of faint lines, especially around her eyes, lines that spoke of laughter and sorrow, and a life lived with an intensity that both intimidated and enthralled me. That first pronouncement hadn't deterred me, not really. If anything, it had added a sharper, more illicit thrill to my already consuming fascination. She was older, wiser, impossibly sophisticated, and I was the eager, fumbling acolyte, desperate for a glimpse into her world, for a crumb of her attention, for any sign that she saw me as more than just another enthusiastic volunteer. Our paths had crossed through the aforementioned arts initiative. I was a budding painter, full of raw talent and a desperate need for validation. She was the renowned curator, the visiting lecturer, the woman who had, with a single, discerning glance, seen something in my clumsy, impassioned canvases that no one else had. She'd taken me under her wing, or so it felt, offering critiques that were both incisive and surprisingly gentle, guiding me through the labyrinthine politics of the local art scene, opening doors I hadn't even known existed. And in the process, she had, quite unintentionally, I'm sure, opened a door within me, a door to a world of emotions, of desires I hadn't known I possessed. I started to find excuses to be near her, to linger in her office after our official meetings were over, to accidentally bump into her at the local coffee shop where she always had her mid-morning espresso. I'd ask her about art, about literature, about life, hanging on her every word, memorizing the way her eyes would light up when she spoke about something she was passionate about, the way her hands, those long, elegant, capable hands, would move as she gestured, emphasizing a point. Her office became my sanctuary, a haven of quiet intellectualism and a simmering, unspoken tension. It smelled of old books and her perfume, a subtle, intoxicating fragrance that was both floral and earthy, something I couldn't quite identify but that was rapidly becoming my favorite scent in the world. I'd watch her as she worked, The way she'd bite her lower lip when she was concentrating, the almost imperceptible frown that would crease her brow, the way she'd push a stray strand of dark, silky hair behind her ear with an unconscious, elegant gesture. These small, mundane details became imbued with a profound significance, each one, a tiny, precious jewel, in the treasure trove of my obsession. And she, in turn, seemed to tolerate my presence, my relentless questioning, my almost pathetic eagerness to please, with that same infuriating, captivating amusement. She'd answer my questions patiently, offer her insights generously, but always, there was that subtle reminder of the distance between us, the unspoken acknowledgement of the years, the experience, the chasm of age and wisdom that separated us. Sometimes, I would catch her looking at me, her dark eyes filled with an expression I couldn't decipher: curiosity, pity, or was it something else entirely, something that mirrored the turmoil, the longing, that raged within my own adolescent heart? I didn't know, I didn't dare to hope, but the possibility, however faint, however reckless, was enough to keep me tethered to her, a willing satellite in her enigmatic orbit. The too young pronouncements became a recurring theme, a gentle, almost teasing refrain in our interactions. She'd say it when I expressed an opinion with a passionate, youthful conviction that bordered on arrogance. She'd say it when I confessed a fear that, to her more experienced ears, must have sounded trivial, almost comical. She'd say it with a shake of her head, a soft sigh, that enigmatic smile playing on her lips, and each time, it was like a fresh application of salt to an open wound, a painful, yet strangely thrilling reminder of the forbidden, intoxicating allure of our impossible connection. The intensity of my feelings for Marianne, I'd finally learned her name, a name that felt as elegant and timeless as she was escalated with each passing week. The Arts Initiative provided ample opportunity for us to be in close proximity, planning events, curating exhibits, sometimes working late into the evening in the quiet, cavernous space of the community gallery. These were the moments I lived for, the moments when the professional boundaries would blur, just slightly, and I would catch glimpses of the woman beneath the composed, enigmatic facade. Her office, once my primary destination for manufactured encounters, now shared its hallowed status with the gallery's back rooms, spaces filled with the scent of turpentine and old canvas, and the even more intoxicating aroma of her nearness. We'd be leaning over a layout plan, our heads bent close together, her dark hair sometimes brushing against my cheek, sending a jolt of pure, unadulterated electricity through my entire body. Or we'd be unpacking a new shipment of artwork, our hands brushing as we reached for the same piece, a fleeting, accidental contact that would leave my skin tingling for hours. She was always careful, always professional. Yet, there were moments, tiny, almost imperceptible fissures in her composure, that fueled my desperate, reckless hope. A lingering gaze that held mine a fraction of a second too long. A slight tremor in her voice when she spoke my name. A faint, almost invisible blush that would stain her high cheekbones when I paid her an overly effusive, undoubtedly transparent, compliment. These were scraps, crumbs, yet I hoarded them like a starving woman, analyzing them, dissecting them, searching for hidden meanings, for reciprocal signs of interest. One particularly late evening, we were alone in the gallery, a storm raging outside, the wind howling like a banshee, the rain lashing against the tall, arched windows. The power had flickered a few times, plunging us into momentary, heart-stopping darkness, before finally, inevitably, giving up the ghost, leaving us in a silence broken only by the fury of the storm and the frantic, erratic thumping of my own heart. Marian, with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of the world, produced a handful of emergency candles from a drawer in her desk and began to light them, her face illuminated by the flickering, uncertain flame, looking like a figure from a Rembrandt painting. All dramatic shadows and luminous highlights. The candlelight softened the sharp angles of her face, lent a new, almost unsettling intimacy to the vast, echoing space. Well, she said, her voice a low murmur, her lips curving into that familiar, enigmatic smile. This is atmospheric. A little too atmospheric for my taste, I admitted, my voice a little shaky. I wasn't afraid of the dark, not really. But the sudden enforced intimacy, the feeling of being trapped with her in this shadowy, storm-tossed world, was doing strange, unsettling things to my already frayed nerves. She chuckled, a low, husky sound that seemed to vibrate in the still, heavy air. Don't worry, Alara. I won't let the gallery ghosts get you. She gestured towards a worn, velvet armchair tucked into a shadowy corner. Come, sit. We might as well be comfortable while we wait for the storm and the power to pass. I did as she asked, perching on the edge of the seat, my hands clenched tightly in my lap. She pulled up a small, rickety stool and sat opposite me, so close that our knees were almost touching, so close that I could feel the warmth radiating from her body, so close that her perfume, that intoxicating blend of floral and earthy notes, enveloped me like a silken shroud. We sat in silence for a long moment, the only sounds the howling of the wind, the lashing of the rain, and the soft, sputtering hiss of the candles. The atmosphere in the room was thick, charged with an almost unbearable tension. You know, Alara, she said finally, her voice barely a whisper, her gaze fixed on the flickering candle flame between us. You remind me, a little, of myself, when I was your age. My heart leaped. This was new, a chink in the armor, a glimpse into her past, into her own carefully guarded vulnerabilities. Really? I breathed, hardly daring to hope. She nodded slowly, a faint, wistful smile playing on her lips. Yes, that same fire, that same passionate, almost painful intensity, that same reckless disregard for the appropriate boundaries. Appropriate boundaries. The words hung in the air between us, a silent, an unspoken acknowledgement of the elephant in the room, the elephant that had been trumpeting its presence for weeks, for months. My breath caught in my throat. My heart hammered against my ribs. Was this it? Was she finally going to address the unspoken? The forbidden? I made mistakes, Alara, she continued, her voice still a low, almost melancholic murmur. Many mistakes. I loved too fiercely, too unwisely. I trusted too easily. I broke things. Including, sometimes, myself. She looked at me then, her dark eyes, luminous in the candlelight, filled with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Sadness? Regret? Or was it a warning? That fire you have. Alara, she said softly, her gaze unwavering. It's a gift. A precious, powerful, dangerous gift. You must learn to temper it, to control it, or it will consume you. Consume me. The words echoed in my mind, a chilling, yet strangely exhilarating prophecy. Because I knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified me, that I was already being consumed. By her. By this impossible, intoxicating, forbidden desire. And the most terrifying part? I didn't want to be saved. I wanted to burn. The candlelight danced across Marian's face, illuminating the fine lines around her eyes, the subtle tremor in her lips, the profound, almost painful, vulnerability that lay beneath her usual composed, enigmatic facade. Her confession, so unexpected, so raw, had stripped away another layer of her carefully constructed defenses, leaving her exposed, human, and in that moment, more achingly, devastatingly, beautiful than I had ever seen her before. My own carefully constructed composure was in tatters. Her words, her warning, her implied acknowledgement of the dangerous, unspoken current that flowed between us, had hit me with the force of a physical blow, stealing the air from my lungs, leaving me breathless, reeling. I wanted to speak, to offer some word of comfort, of understanding, but my throat was tight, my mind a maelstrom of conflicting emotions. The silence in the gallery stretched, thick and heavy, broken only by the relentless fury of the storm outside and the soft, sputtering hiss of the candles, which seemed to be weeping tears of wax onto the dusty wooden floor. Her gaze, still fixed on mine, was a potent, mesmerizing force, drawing me in, holding me captive. I could feel the heat radiating from her body, even from a few feet away, a warmth that seemed to beckon me closer, closer. Her scent, that intoxicating blend of floral and earthy notes, now mingled with the fainter, muskier aroma of her skin, a fragrance that was both foreign and achingly, terrifyingly, familiar. "You are so young, Alara," she whispered, her voice a fragile thread in the charged silence, her eyes filled with a sadness so profound it made my heart ache. "So full of potential, of hope. I don't want to see you damaged by me, by this, this." The word, so small, so innocuous, yet it encompassed a universe of forbidden desire, of unspoken longing, of a connection that defied logic, that defied convention, that defied everything we knew to be right. But what if I want to be damaged? I blurted out, the words tumbling from my lips before I could stop them, a raw, reckless, desperate confession. Her eyes widened, just slightly, a flicker of surprise, of something else? In their dark, luminous depths, a faint, almost imperceptible tremor ran through her. "Don't say that, Elara," she said, her voice barely audible. A plea, a warning. "You don't know what you're saying. You don't understand the cost." "Don't I?" I challenged, my voice gaining a new, unfamiliar strength, fueled by a potent cocktail of desire and desperation. "I understand that I feel more alive when I'm with you than I have ever felt with anyone else. I understand that when you look at me, really look at me, it's like you see the part of me that no one else even knows exists. I understand that the thought of not being near you, of not seeing you, of not wanting you, is unbearable." The words hung in the air between us, a stark, undeniable, terrifying truth. I had said it. I had finally given voice to the secret that had been consuming me for months, the secret that was both my greatest joy and my deepest shame. The silence that followed was absolute, profound, broken only by the frantic, erratic thumping of my own heart, which seemed to be trying to beat its way out of my chest. Marion stared at me, her face pale in the flickering candlelight, her expression unreadable. I braced myself for the rejection, for the anger, for the pity, for the inevitable drawing of the line. But it didn't come. Instead, she closed her eyes, a long, shuddering sigh escaping her lips, a sound that seemed to carry the weight of centuries, of 1,000 unspoken sorrows. When she opened them again, her dark eyes were filled with a raw, aching vulnerability that mirrored my own. "Oh, Alara," she whispered, her voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Regret? Resignation? Or was it surrender? She rose from her rickety stool, her movements fluid, almost serpentine, the dark, flowing fabric of her dress whispering around her like the wings of some ancient, predatory bird. She came towards me, slowly, deliberately, until she was standing directly in front of me, so close that I could feel the warmth radiating from her body, so close that her perfume was an almost dizzying presence. She reached out, her cool, dry fingers gently cupping my cheek, her touch sending a jolt of pure, unadulterated electricity through my entire body. Her thumb stroked my cheekbone, a feather-like caress that made my breath catch, my entire being focused on that single, electrifying point of contact. "You are playing with fire, child," she murmured, her voice a low, husky caress. Her violet eyes, no, they were dark, almost black in this light, searching mine, as if seeking not just an answer, but an acknowledgement, a surrender. "I know," I breathed, my own voice shaky, unsteady. "And I don't care." A slow, predatory smile curved her lips, a smile of triumph, of satisfaction, of a dawning, dangerous, exhilarating complicity. Her eyes, those luminous, predatory dark eyes, seemed to glow with an inner fire. "Then burn with me, Alara," she whispered, her voice a silken command that I was powerless to resist. And then, she leaned in, slowly, deliberately, and her lips met mine. The first touch was soft, almost tentative, a question, but there was no hesitation in my response. I met her kiss with an answering hunger, a desperate, urgent need that had been building within me for weeks, for months, for what felt like an eternity. The kiss deepened, quickly, fiercely, a desperate exploration of mouths and senses, a raw, untamed expression of a desire that had been suppressed for too long. Her tongue, surprisingly bold, delved into my mouth, a silken, knowing invader that mapped the sensitive contours, igniting fires I hadn't known existed. I responded in kind, my own tongue meeting hers in a desperate, urgent dance, a silent, passionate conversation that transcended words. A low groan rumbled in her chest, a sound that was both an admission of pleasure and a cry of surrender. I melted into her, my arms snaking around her neck, my fingers tangling in the silky strands of her dark hair, pulling her closer until there was no space left between us, until our bodies were pressed together, a desperate, searing embrace. The world outside, the storm, the gallery, the consequences, all of it faded into insignificance. There was only this, the heat, the pressure, the intoxicating taste of her, the feeling of her body yielding against mine. This was madness, glorious, terrifying, exhilarating madness. And I was eagerly, joyfully, irrevocably consumed. The kiss was a conflagration, a wildfire consuming the last vestiges of my restraint, of her resistance. Marian's mouth, which I had fantasized about for countless sleepless nights, was a revelation. Firm, yet yielding, her taste a heady cocktail of old books, strong coffee, and something uniquely, intoxicatingly, her. Her hands, those elegant, capable hands that could discern the subtle nuances of a masterpiece or the delicate balance of a community project, were now agents of a different kind of artistry, their touch sending shivers of illicit pleasure coursing through my already sensitized skin. One hand was tangled in my hair, her fingers gripping, pulling me closer, deepening the kiss with an almost desperate urgency. The other slid down my back, her palm flat against the thin fabric of my shirt, tracing the curve of my spine, sending sparks of electricity radiating outwards, down to the very tips of my toes. I was lost in a maelstrom of sensation, my mind unable to process anything beyond the overwhelming reality of her touch, her taste, her scent. The storm outside raged, a wild, elemental symphony that seemed to echo the untamed nature of our embrace. Each flash of lightning illuminated the gallery in a stark, fleeting brilliance, freezing us in a series of illicit, passionate tableaux. Two figures, one young, one older, locked in a forbidden dance of desire. My own hands were not idle. They clutched at her shoulders, then slid around her waist, pulling her tighter against me, needing to feel the lean strength of her body, the frantic beat of her heart against mine. I could feel the subtle tremor that ran through her, a mirroring of my own barely controlled shaking, a testament to the sheer force of the emotions and sensations coursing between us. She broke the kiss, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her forehead resting against mine. Her dark eyes, when they met mine, were luminous, almost feral, filled with a raw, untamed hunger that mirrored my own. "Alara," she whispered, her voice thick with an emotion I couldn't quite decipher. Desire, certainly, but also something else. Something that looked almost like awe? Or was it fear? "What are we doing?" Her words were a token protest, a last, fleeting nod to the boundaries we were so spectacularly demolishing, but there was no conviction in her voice, no real attempt to pull away. If anything, her body pressed closer, her hips moving in a slow, sinuous rhythm against mine that sent a fresh wave of heat crashing through me. "I don't know," I breathed, my own voice equally unsteady. And I don't care. And it was true. In that moment, consumed by the intoxicating reality of her embrace, I didn't care about the consequences, about the impropriety, about the inevitable pain that might follow. All that mattered was this fierce, desperate, beautiful connection, this undeniable, irresistible pull that had drawn us together, against all odds, against all reason. She kissed me again, a hard, desperate kiss that tasted of rain and longing and the bittersweet tang of forbidden fruit. Her hands moved with a new, bolder confidence, her fingers tracing the line of my jaw, then sliding lower, over my throat, to the delicate curve of my collarbone. Her touch was like a brand, searing my skin, leaving a trail of fire in its wake. I arched into her touch, a silent invitation, my body alive with a desperate, urgent need. The air in the gallery was thick with our mingled scents, with the sound of our ragged breathing, with the almost unbearable tension of our shared anticipation. One of her hands found its way beneath my shirt, her palm flat against the bare skin of my stomach, a searing brand that made me gasp. Her touch was cool at first, then quickly warmed, her fingers spreading out, exploring, learning the shape of me. I could feel the slight roughness of her fingertips, a delicious friction against my sensitized skin. A soft moan escaped her lips, a sound of pure, unadulterated surrender, and she pulled me closer, her body molding against mine, as if she were trying to absorb me, to make us one. We stumbled, a tangle of limbs and urgent desires, towards the worn velvet armchair I had been sitting in earlier, its faded grandeur a strangely appropriate throne for the illicit queen of my affections. She sank into it, pulling me down with her, so that I was half lying, half sitting in her lap, her arms wrapped around me, her mouth still locked with mine. The position was awkward, intimate, overwhelmingly sensual. I could feel the lean strength of her thighs beneath me, the soft swell of her breasts against my back, the frantic beat of her heart against my own. Her hands were everywhere, exploring, learning, her touch both tender and demanding, coaxing from me a response that was both a surrender and a fierce, untamed assertion of my own burgeoning desire. This was madness. Glorious, terrifying, exhilarating madness. A descent into a world of sensation and emotion I hadn't known existed, a world where the rules didn't apply, where the only law was the fierce, undeniable truth of our shared hunger. And as the storm outside reached its crescendo, a deafening primal roar, I knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified me, that I was lost. Utterly, irrevocably, beautifully lost. And in the intoxicating depths of Marian's embrace, I finally, felt found. The armchair, old and yielding, became an island in the storm, a sanctuary for our burgeoning, forbidden intimacy. Marian's lap was a surprisingly firm, yet intoxicatingly soft, haven. My position, half sprawled across her, was undeniably awkward, yet it facilitated a new level of electrifying contact. The thin fabric of my jeans was a poor barrier against the heat radiating from her thighs, and the pressure of her body against my back, the soft swell of her breasts, was a constant, delicious torment. Her hands, which had been exploring my waist and stomach, now grew bolder, more insistent. One hand slid upwards, beneath my shirt, her fingers tracing the delicate curve of my ribs, then moving higher, her thumb brushing against the underside of my breast. I gasped, my body arching instinctively, a silent plea for more. She seemed to understand, her fingers deftly unhooking the clasp of my bra, a feat accomplished with a surprising, almost practiced ease that sent a fresh jolt of arousal through me. The garment fell away, and her hand cupped my breast, her touch both gentle and firm, her thumb stroking my already hardened nipple, sending spirals of pleasure radiating outwards, down to the very core of my being. I cried out, a small, choked sound, my head falling back against her shoulder, exposing my throat, a gesture of complete and utter submission. She took advantage of my vulnerability, her lips leaving mine to trace a searing path down my neck, her teeth nipping gently at the sensitive skin, eliciting a fresh wave of shivers, of an almost painful pleasure. Alara, she murmured against my skin, her voice a low, husky growl, a sound that vibrated through me, igniting every nerve ending. You taste of youth, of forbidden fruit. Her words, a validation of the desire that had consumed me for so long, were like fuel to the fire. I wanted more. I needed more. My own hands, which had been gripping her shoulders, began their own exploration. I fumbled with the buttons of her silk blouse, my fingers clumsy, uncoordinated, driven by a desperate, urgent need to feel her skin against mine. She helped me, her own hands covering mine, guiding them, until the last button was undone, and the soft fabric parted, revealing the delicate lace of her camisole, the swell of her breasts, the smooth, pale skin of her stomach. I pushed the blouse off her shoulders, letting it fall to the floor, a forgotten casualty of our escalating passion. Her skin was even softer than I had imagined, warm and yielding beneath my touch. I traced the line of her collarbone, the curve of her shoulder, marveling at the exquisite beauty of her, a beauty that was both elegant and fiercely, unapologetically sensual. She unhooked her own camisole, letting it join her blouse on the floor, and then we were skin to skin, torso to torso, the sensation overwhelming, intoxicating. The soft pressure of her breasts against my back, the warmth of her stomach against my own, the feeling of her heart beating in frantic unison with mine. It was a symphony of sensation, a confirmation of a connection that was as profound as it was forbidden. The candlelight flickered, casting our entwined shadows on the wall, transforming us into primal, elemental beings, lost in a dance as old as time. Her free hand, the one not caressing my breast, slid lower, over the flat expanse of my stomach, her fingers tracing lazy, tantalizing circles that made my muscles clench in anticipation. Then, lower still, her touch becoming more intimate, more daring, her fingers brushing against the denim of my jeans, at the apex of my thighs. I gasped, my body arching off her lap, a silent plea, a desperate invitation. She seemed to understand, her fingers deftly unbuttoning my jeans, the sound surprisingly loud in the charged silence, broken only by our ragged breathing and the distant rumble of thunder. With a slow, deliberate movement, she began to slide my jeans down, her touch sending fresh waves of heat coursing through me. The denim felt rough, restrictive, an unwelcome impediment to the intimacy I now craved with every fiber of my being. When my jeans were finally pooled around my ankles, she paused, her hand resting on my hip, her thumb stroking the soft skin of my inner thigh. "Are you sure, Alara?" she whispered, her voice a little shaky, her dark eyes, luminous in the candlelight, searching mine. "Once we cross this line, there is no going back. No going back." The words hung in the air, a final, stark warning. But it was too late. I was already across the line, lost in the intoxicating wilderness of her embrace. "I'm sure," I breathed, my voice thick with a desire that had long since eclipsed any fear, any hesitation. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." A slow, predatory smile curved her lips. "Good," she purred. And then, her hand moved, decisively, intimately, her fingers finding the damp heat between my legs, and the world exploded in a blinding flash of white-hot pleasure. The storm outside was nothing compared to the tempest she unleashed within me, a tempest that threatened to consume us both, body and soul, in its beautiful, terrifying, exhilarating fury. The touch of Marian's fingers, so deliberate, so knowing, against the most sensitive, secret part of me, was a cataclysm. It was as if a live wire had been pressed against my skin, sending a million volts of pure, unadulterated sensation coursing through my veins, short-circuiting my brain, obliterating every coherent thought, every last vestige of restraint. I cried out, a raw, involuntary sound that was swallowed by the renewed fury of the storm outside, my body arching violently in her lap, my hands clutching at her shoulders, her hair. Anything to anchor myself in the maelstrom of pleasure that was consuming me. Her touch was not tentative, not exploratory. It was confident, almost shockingly so, as if she had known me, known my body, in some other life, some other dream. Her fingers moved with a skill, a precision, that bespoke a deep intuitive understanding of female pleasure, of my pleasure. She knew just where to touch, just how much pressure to apply, just how to vary the rhythm, the intensity, to coax from me a response that was both a complete surrender and a fierce, untamed assertion of my own burgeoning desire. I was lost, adrift on a sea of sensation, my senses overwhelmed, my body a taut, quivering instrument playing a symphony of ecstasy under her masterful touch. The scent of her, that intoxicating blend of old books and floral notes, and her own unique, musky arousal, filled my nostrils, making my head swim, my body tremble. The sound of her ragged breathing, a low, guttural counterpoint to my own frantic gasps, was an incredible aphrodisiac, fueling the fire that raged within me. Her other hand, the one that had been caressing my breast, now moved to my hip, her grip firm, possessive, holding me steady as her fingers continued their intimate, devastating assault. I could feel the lean strength of her thighs beneath me, the subtle shift of her muscles as she adjusted her position, maximizing the contact, the friction, the almost unbearable pleasure. The candlelight flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls, on our entwined bodies, transforming the staid, respectable gallery office into a den of illicit pagan worship. And she was the high priestess, her body the altar, her touch the sacrament. Tears streamed down my face, tears of pure, unadulterated ecstasy, tears of a release so profound, so overwhelming, that it felt as if my very soul were shattering, reforming, being reborn in the crucible of her touch. Marian. I gasped, her name a broken, ragged plea on my lips. Oh God, Marian. She responded with a low groan, her mouth finding mine once more, a deep, possessive kiss that swallowed my cries, her tongue delving, demanding, mirroring the intimate exploration her fingers were conducting below. It was an overwhelming assault on my senses, a symphony of pleasure so intense it bordered on pain. My mind, usually a whirl of anxious thought, was blissfully, gloriously empty. There was only sensation, raw, untamed, elemental. And then, I felt it. The first, subtle tremor, the telltale clenching of my inner muscles, the sharp, indrawn breath that signaled the approaching release. It was building, coiling, tightening within me, an unbearable, exquisite pressure that demanded, that screamed for release. Let go, Elara, she whispered against my lips, her voice a low, husky command, her own body trembling with a barely suppressed anticipation. Let go for me. Give it to me. And I did. With a final, desperate surge of movement, a guttural cry torn from the very depths of my being, the world exploded in a blinding flash of white-hot light, a shattering, transcendent release that left me gasping, trembling, my body convulsing in a series of violent, shuddering aftershocks. I clung to her, anchoring myself in the eye of the storm, tears of pure, unadulterated ecstasy streaming down my face, mingling with the sweat that slicked our bodies. She held me close, her own body still trembling, her breath hot and ragged against my ear, whispering soft, soothing words, words of comfort, of shared release, words that were lost in the overwhelming tide of sensation and emotion. As the waves subsided, leaving me limp and sated, my body humming with a languid, delicious exhaustion, she shifted, her weight resting lightly against me. We lay there for a long moment, tangled in a heap of limbs and discarded clothing, the silence in the room now filled with a profound sense of peace, of completion. The storm outside had begun to abate, the thunder retreating into the distance, the rain softening to a gentle, almost melancholic, patter against the tall, arched windows. I turned my head, looking at her profile in the dim, flickering candlelight. Her eyes were closed. Her dark lashes fanned out against her cheeks, her lips slightly swollen, curved in a soft, satisfied smile. She looked beautiful, content, and utterly, devastatingly desirable. She opened her eyes, as if sensing my gaze, and her dark eyes, now soft and luminous, met mine. She reached out, her fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw, her touch sending a fresh wave of warmth, of a tender, almost painful affection, through me. That, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, was extraordinary. I nodded, unable to speak, my throat suddenly tight with unshed tears. Extraordinary didn't even begin to cover it. It had been a revelation, a transformation, a journey to a place within myself I hadn't known existed. She leaned in and kissed me, a soft, lingering kiss, a kiss of tenderness, of shared intimacy, of a dawning, terrifying, beautiful complicity. And now, my fiery Alara, she murmured against my lips, a faint, predatory smile playing on hers, her dark eyes glowing with a renewed, dangerous fire. Now, it is my turn to burn. And as she moved, her body covering mine once more, her hands and mouth beginning a new, even more intimate exploration, I knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified me, that the night, this wild, tempestuous, unforgettable night, was far from over. The declaration hung in the air, a promise, a delicious threat, Marian's turn to burn. The thought sent a fresh jolt of anticipation, mingled with a surprising surge of possessive power, through my already overwrought system. The languor that had settled over me after my own release began to dissipate, replaced by a new, eager energy, a desire to reciprocate, to explore, to worship at the altar of her body as she had so masterfully worshipped at mine. Her weight shifted, and with a fluid, almost feline grace, she maneuvered us so that I was now lying back against the worn velvet of the armchair, and she was poised above me, her dark hair, damp and disheveled, falling around her face like a silken curtain, her eyes, those luminous, predatory dark eyes, burning into mine, with an intensity that stole the air from my lungs. The candlelight flickered, casting dancing shadows across her features, accentuating the sharp angles of her cheekbones, the enigmatic curve of her lips, the ancient, knowing fire that smoldered in their depths. She was magnificent, a creature of shadow and light, of elegance and a raw, untamed sensuality, and she was, in this moment, in this stolen, sacred space, entirely focused on me. Her hands, those elegant, capable hands, began their exploration, not with the urgent hunger of moments before, but with a slow, deliberate reverence, as if she were committing every inch of my skin, every curve, every hollow, to memory. Her fingers traced the line of my collarbone, then moved lower, to the valley between my breasts, her touch sending shivers of anticipation cascading through me. Her gaze followed her hands, a slow, appreciative appraisal that made my skin prickle. My nipples harden into tight, aching buds under her intense scrutiny. A faint, almost imperceptible smile touched her lips. "So responsive, Alara," she murmured, her voice a low, husky caress that vibrated through me. "So, beautifully, exquisitely, alive." Her mouth found mine again, and this time, the kiss was different. Slower, deeper, more deliberate. It was a kiss of possession, of mastery, of a profound, almost spiritual intimacy. Her tongue, a silken, knowing invader, mapped the sensitive contours of my mouth, tasting, exploring, claiming, drawing from me soft, involuntary moans that seemed to fuel her own escalating arousal. Her hands moved lower, over the flat expanse of my stomach, her fingers tracing lazy, tantalizing circles that made my muscles clench in anticipation. Then, lower still, her touch becoming more intimate, more daring, her fingers brushing against the damp heat at the apex of my thighs. I gasped, my body arching off the armchair, a silent plea, a desperate invitation. She seemed to understand, her fingers deftly parting the delicate folds, finding the slick, swollen nub of my clitoris. Her touch was electric, a shockwave that made me cry out her name, a raw, broken sound. But this time, her exploration was different. It was not the urgent, driving rhythm of her earlier ministrations. This was slower, more teasing, more tormenting. Her fingers danced, feather light, across my sensitized skin, then pressed, firmly, deeply, then retreated, leaving me gasping, writhing, aching for more. It was an exquisite torture, a symphony of sensation that pushed me closer and closer to the edge, only to pull me back at the last possible moment, leaving me suspended in a state of almost unbearable, delicious agony. "Patience, Alara," she whispered against my lips, her voice a low, husky command, her own body trembling with a barely suppressed anticipation. "Good things come to those who wait." And then, just as I thought I could bear it no longer, just as I was about to scream, to beg for release, she shifted, her body moving lower, her dark hair cascading over my stomach, my thighs, a silken, fragrant curtain that veiled her actions, amplifying my other senses, making me even more acutely aware of the heat of her mouth, the flick of her tongue, the gentle, insistent suction as she took me into her mouth. The world exploded. Not in a blinding flash of white-hot light, as before, but in a slow, rolling wave of pleasure. A deep, resonant hum that started in the very core of my being and radiated outwards, consuming me, body and soul, in its warm, intoxicating embrace. It was a different kind of release, slower, deeper, more profound, an unraveling, an untangling, a coming undone. And as the waves subsided, leaving me limp and sated, my body humming with a languid, delicious exhaustion, she raised her head, her lips, slick and swollen, curved in a soft, triumphant smile, her dark eyes glowing with a possessive, satisfied fire. "There," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Now, now we have both burned." She settled beside me in the cramped confines of the armchair, our bodies still intimately entwined, the silence in the room now filled with a profound sense of peace, of completion, of a shared, sacred intimacy. The storm outside had finally passed, the rain softening to a gentle, almost melancholic patter against the tall, arched windows. The first, faint hints of dawn were beginning to seep through the grimy glass, painting the gallery in shades of gray and lavender. We lay like that for a long time, wrapped in a cocoon of shared warmth, our limbs tangled, our breathing slow and even, the only sounds the soft, rhythmic beat of our hearts, and the gentle dripping of water from the eaves. There were no words. None were needed. Everything that had needed to be said, everything that could be said, had been spoken in the silent, eloquent language of our bodies, in the raw, uninhibited expression of our shared, forbidden, beautiful desire. As the gray light of dawn grew stronger, casting long, uncertain shadows across the gallery floor, a new kind of awareness began to settle between us. The raw, uninhibited passion of the night had given way to a quieter, more contemplative intimacy, an intimacy tinged with the dawning realization of what we had done, of the irrevocable nature of our shared transgression. Marian stirred beside me, her body tensing slightly, as if she too were grappling with the dawning implications of our actions. She shifted, propping herself up on an elbow, her dark, tousled hair falling across her face, her eyes, when they met mine, filled with a complex, unreadable emotion, desire, certainly, but also something else. Something that looked an awful lot like apprehension, regret. The silence stretched, taut and fragile, the intimacy of the night before giving way to a new, uncertain awkwardness. The easy, uninhibited connection we had shared seemed to be receding, replaced by a dawning awareness of the complexities, the potential for pain, that lay ahead. "Alara," she began, her voice a little hoarse, a little hesitant. She paused, as if searching for the right words. Words that could somehow bridge the chasm that was suddenly, alarmingly, opening up between us. I waited, my heart pounding, a cold dread seeping into my bones. The magic of the night was fading, and in its place, the harsh, unforgiving light of day was beginning to reveal the true, complicated nature of our situation. What had felt so right, so inevitable, in the heat of the moment, now seemed fraught with peril, with the potential for heartbreak and devastating consequences. Last night, she said finally, her voice barely a whisper, her gaze dropping to the tangled heap of our discarded clothing on the floor, was a storm. A beautiful, terrifying, necessary storm. Necessary. The word surprised me. I hadn't thought of it that way. I had thought of it as reckless, as forbidden, as a moment of madness. But necessary? But storms pass, Alara, she continued, her voice regaining some of its familiar, melancholic cadence. And then there is the aftermath, the debris, the rebuilding. Rebuilding. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with unspoken questions, with unvoiced fears. Rebuilding what? Our lives? Our relationship? Or merely the carefully constructed walls we had so spectacularly demolished? She looked at me then, her dark eyes filled with a sadness so profound it made my heart ache. You are still so young, Alara, she said softly, her voice laced with an undeniable sincerity. So wonderfully, terrifyingly young, and I am not. The unspoken chasm, the invisible, insurmountable barrier of age, of experience, of a life already lived, a life perhaps already marred by too many storms, too much debris, loomed before us once more, stark and undeniable in the cold light of dawn. What we shared last night, she went on, her voice barely audible, a plea, a warning. It was a moment out of time, a beautiful, incandescent, impossible moment. But it cannot be our reality. Her words, though not unexpected, were like a physical blow, each one landing with a sharp, painful impact. The fragile hope that had flickered within me, the hope that this might be the beginning of something, not just a one-time transgression, died a swift, brutal death. I know, I managed, my voice barely a whisper, though every fiber of my being screamed in protest. But it felt so real. A sad smile touched her lips. Oh, it was real, Alara, she said, her voice thick with emotion. Make no mistake about that. It was the realest thing I have felt in a very long time. She reached out, her fingers gently tracing the line of my jaw, her touch sending a fresh wave of warmth, of a tender, almost painful affection, through me. But some real things, she continued, her voice dropping even lower, almost to a whisper, a silken, irresistible poison, are too dangerous to exist in the light of day. Some fires, if allowed to burn unchecked, will consume everything in their path, including my fiery Alara, you. Her eyes, those luminous, predatory dark eyes, held mine captive, their gaze unwavering, intense, as if she were trying to impart a wisdom, a warning, that I was too young, too reckless, too consumed by the intoxicating memory of the flames, to fully comprehend. We cannot be, she said finally, the words a death knell, a condemnation, not in the way you want. Not in the way, perhaps, some foolish, reckless part of me wants to. She paused, her gaze searching mine. Can you understand that, Alara? Can you accept it? Accept it? My mind screamed no. My heart ached with a pain so intense it was almost physical. But looking into her eyes, seeing the genuine distress, the weight of responsibility she carried, the profound, unutterable sadness that lay beneath her composed, enigmatic facade, I knew I had no choice. To fight, to push, would only cause more pain, more potential damage. To us both. Yes, I whispered, the word tasting like ash in my mouth, like defeat, like the bitter, unbearable end of a beautiful, impossible dream. I can accept that. Though in that moment, as the first, pale rays of dawn began to paint the gallery in shades of gray and despair, I wasn't sure I was capable of accepting anything but the hollow, aching void that had suddenly, brutally, opened up within me.